So there are two engines out there that are rivals to the Honda K series engines. And they're both found in a Nissan Altima. I am Z, and we're going to talk about it on this episode of ModStars. Hello everybody, if you're new to the channel, welcome. If not, welcome back to ModStars. Again, I am your host Z. Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Follow me on Instagram. And today we're going to talk about four-cylinder engines. I know it doesn't seem all that great and happy, but these are important because they have just as much, if not more potential than the popular Honda K series engine does. And as I said earlier, yes, they are found in the Nissan Altimas of different years. Even in the Nissan Sentra, but that'll be in a separate video. You know, it's kind of funny. The last episode I made about the Audi, if you haven't watched that, check that out. It's a video before this. I actually put a link in the description as well. I said it was going to be the last Sleeper Series episode for a minute. But that same night, I thought about 5-6 other cars I can do videos on, so it worked out great. So we're going to get into this right now. So we're going to start with the KA24DE, and then we're going to go to the newer QR25DE. So starting in 1993, all the way up to 2001, the Nissan Altima used the KA24DE. If that motor sounds familiar, it should, because it was found in US variants of the Nissan 240. And of course, there are some little trucks that had it as well. But it's 2.4 liter, 4-cylinder, made 150 horsepower and 155 pound-feet of torque. These cars at the time weighed anywhere from 2,889 pounds to 3,012 pounds, which, again, they're sedans. It's not bad, and they're front-wheel drive, so the weight distribution is going to be a little different than even a modern-day front-wheel drive car or any other sedan with a different layout, like rear-wheel drive, for example. Might even be heavier for those. We'll talk about that later. So, of course, it's front-wheel drive. I know it's not very popular. And we're not even going to talk about turbos or superchargers today either, just to be very clear. Reason being is because it seems like the only all-motor routes that people go with four cylinders are Hondas. We understand why. And if they want more power, even though it may not be necessary, it actually might even act as a double-edged sword on certain cars. We're going to talk about that in another video. Might have too much power than what they need it for. The setup is wrong, or they don't have a setup right. Anyway, point being, these motors are pretty cheap, and sure, it's not as popular as the Honda crowd, but that could mean that parts are not as expensive either. In other words, what would cost you to get an entire, just to buy a K series, would probably take half of that to put the mods in this engine to make the same amount of power. By the way, even if you don't, it's more torquey than the K series is. Something to think about. So back in the day, between 2001, 2002 and forward, there may have been some, what is the word? Defective floorboards there it is. So defective floorboards. It was actually 2002 to 06. I just want to throw this out there. But the reason why it happened is because the front mud guards, so that little splash shield up front, either wasn't high enough or there was no stone guard applied to the plates underneath the car, which caused it to be exposed to the elements, caused rusting and things of that nature. So let's say that you decided to pull up, the carpet on your car and everything's good. Or honestly, it's just kind of like it's already there. Of course, there's ways to fix that. You can cut it out, have it weld it shut, whatever. Silicone spray to fill it in, some type of filler, of course. But if you were really worried about that, because, these cars are pretty cheap anyway, especially in the 90s, compared to now, they're You could probably find it for like $2-3 grand, honestly. But if you were worried about that, you can actually buy Stone Guard in an 11-ounce spray for like $22. So outside of that, it's cosmetic stuff. There's many ways to fix that and deal with that. If you want to do it by the T, do it honestly what Nissan didn't do back in the 90s. That's the way to do it. Let's go on to the fun stuff. So, as always, if you like the video, you like the knowledge I share and spread, great, thank you, happy, hit the like button. However, I am not responsible for what you do or don't do. You make your bed, you sleep in it. If you have successes, great. If you have failures, you learn from them. Check your local laws. If you care about that stuff, it's on you. That being said, let's talk about mods. So, KA24 is a 9.5 to 1 compression ratio, about 6,900 RPM. There's redline, and there's a cast iron block, so of course a little bit heavier of a block, but it is more durable, especially, I know we're not going to talk about it, but if you were to run boost applications like turbos or superchargers. It's kind of why, people who got into drifting at the time before 240s were so expensive didn't worry about SR20 swaps, because they can make the same amount of power, if not more, with less headache because they already have the engine, the car's already running. With the car that they already have, it only makes sense. It saves you money, time, and it's more convenient. And there's a huge misconception even to this day in America about drifting that you need a lot of power, and you don't. You need to understand how to carry momentum, and you need a certain amount of skill, which means, yes, you have to practice to get the car to drift. Maybe you need some suspension work. Maybe you need less grippy tires when you're starting out. Maybe you need to wait until it rains. Or maybe you need to work on just a standard handbrake. You may not need a hydraulic handbrake. But the notion that you need a lot of power to drift is wrong. I'm just going to be blunt about it. If you don't believe me, look at the guys in Europe, especially look at the guys in Japan. Go back to the old videos. They're drifting, cars that had 90 horsepower, and they don't necessarily strip the cars on the inside. It's full interior as well. So there's that. If you need me to, I'll even do you a favor and just put a link down below as well. But sorry, getting a little off topic. Let's get back to the mods here. All right, so I'm going to keep this simple, short and sweet. KA24, 9.5 to 1 compression ratio. Red line about 6,900 RPM, cast iron block. Yeah, it's a little heavier of a motor, but it's older, but it also makes it a stronger motor. Drop-in filter, as far as intake goes, you don't need a cold air intake per se. K&N, $60, grab that. Altima Nation has OBX headers, 421 header style, that is $425. Brian Crower has drop-in cams, 264 cams, for $472. And as far as engine management goes, Mega Squirt plug and play for $830. I say the Mega Squirt because, again, drift scene, 240s. A lot of people use the KA24. I imagine if it works for that car, it would work for this one because it's the same engine, really. But there might be slight differences I'm not sure of. If you wanted to take it a step further, be very clear here. Because you dropped in the cams, the head's already off the motor at that point. Let's get it ported and polished. Local machine shop, probably port and polish the head of the motor for $300-400. It depends on where you're at and what they quote you for. Catback exhaust, from what I found, $400, like a Borla or something like that. And a very underrated mod that I'm going to mention for every Altima engine, including the VQ V6 for another video, are pulleys. So NST, Nonstop Tuning, shout out to them. Been watching them since they sponsored drift cars when I was in Texas. They have pulleys for a lot of different cars, especially the K24, the QR25, VQ, so on and so forth. A pulley can go for as low as $86 or a set for as high as $250. How that works: lighter materials, less work on the engine, more power is back to the engine. Very oversimplified, but that's the basis of it. Now, moving on to 2008, where the QR25DE was introduced. This started out with 175 horsepower and 180 pound-feet of torque. 9.5 to 1 or 10.5 to 1 compression ratio on this. So, just think about that. 2.4 liters and now 2.5. And this is a newer engine, so it probably has some valve timing technology with it as well. Again, not nonstop. Ultimination, performance header. It's actually kind of cheap for this engine. Sorry. I know the prices, off track here. I know the prices are not, guaranteed by the time you look at this video and look at these parts, and nothing's cheap right now. But as far as the QR25 mods go, they're pretty affordable compared to the other two engines that the Altima has. So the performance header for this is $135 for Ultimination. Pulleys go for $100. Catback exhaust was actually the most expensive thing that I found outside of the cams. It's about, honestly, like $400 for the exhaust again, more or less. And then JWT S1 cams, the drop-in cams, for $620. Now, as far as tuning goes, there's up rev. Again, just like the Infinity VK56 video I did. The cost for the up rev will depend on whether you want to tune the car or if somebody in your area can do that for you. But if I'm not mistaken, they do have the software for the car, and you wouldn't have to worry about getting an ECU and a map and things like that from a Sentra, which that costs like $1,100 or so from a different shop that I found, which I didn't mention here in this video include because it's $1,100+ trying to help you guys do everything on budget here as best as I can. So parts wise. So that's why I didn't include that. But up rev, is something you can use to tune the car. And I'll put a dyno video I found on YouTube on such build. It was, I believe, intake, header, exhaust, and up rev. And the car made about 190 horsepower, more or less. And that is why I think these engines have great potential. So let's go back to the KA24 really quick. Theoretically speaking, let's just say for conversation's sake, it made 125 horsepower, 130 horsepower, stock, healthy. And you add all the mods I mentioned earlier, you're only building the top part of the motor, that's it. And it bumped you up to 160, 170 max. That, for me, is a pretty good number, especially considering the fact that they had quite a few manuals back then in the 90s. And the cars didn't weigh as much. And even if you think that's a lot for that kind of car, well, don't forget, it's front-wheel drive. Most of that weight is in the front of the car. So, and usually front-wheel drive cars, their, I guess, differential gears are taller. So, well, not taller, I guess, shorter. So the acceleration is a little bit more crisp on front-wheel drive cars by design. And the reason why I bring this up is because that number, let's say it's 170 max. With the weight, I know you guys have, some lightly modded Focus and Fiesta STs and Subarus in your neighborhood, which means that you probably also have, Dodge and Challenger RTs as well, even the new ones that you can, compete with and run with. And even if you don't do that, you can take it to a drag strip or a road course, get on this thing all day and drive it home fine and not have to spend that much money on building it. And that's what makes this very fun to me. Comparing this to Honda engines, let's say, a B series VTEC. I know there's a lot of people who might argue that. Let's say it was a B16 or B18 or B20 for that matter, just to make everybody feel good. Bolt-ons tune 150, 160, 170 on a good day. And that's not even common, generally because, four-cylinder engines are not typically built, if not at all, unless they're going to be built for boost, like turbochargers. And really, that's it. I mean, maybe some superchargers, but that's really it. Other than that, it's a motor swap. Nobody really builds the motor they have, which never made sense to me because there's so much more that goes into it than just, what motor you have and setup and driving skill. And again, I'll put that in another video, but it's just very important to me that there's a lot of factors in other than what motor you have. But that's why I think even now, even though this has been done, it's not as popular. You can check online on YouTube videos, forums, whatever. Of course, the Honda community is strong. It's huge. And I'm not trying to upset anybody. I'm just saying if you wanted to go a different route, Nissan is a very affordable way to do that. And I'm going to make another video on this. Scion is too. But I digress. Now, segueing back to the QR25. Bolt-ons and tune, basic bolt-ons and tune, had this car netted nearly at 200 horsepower to the wheels. If you add the cams in there and the pulleys, yeah, it's going over that. One could argue with me, well, the K series only needs, bolt-ons and a tune to hit 225. Yeah, you're right. But how many K series are out there that people can get? You could argue there's a lot because it's Honda. Yeah, I understand that. But there's at least 3 cars that I can think of that have K series, and well, actually 4. But more people would neglect the K20 and get a K24 anyway. A little bit more. And honestly, you should make the power. It's 2.4 liters, kind of like how this should. It's 2.5 liters, or the KA24. It's an older motor, but it's 2.4 liters. So yeah, of course those numbers are fair. I think they're expected. I understand everybody's point, but you wouldn't have to see SR20 Sentras run against these things as much either. Imagine when some of those Sentras are competitive. Put a K24 in there or a QR25. How will it go? Might be the same. Might not be. Might be better. It has to see. Overall, it's just a different platform. I know I sped through the mods and stuff. I'm just going to spend my time talking a little bit more. But I really think this is important to share as far as the car community goes, because everybody gets the same stuff and does the same thing for the same results or not so great results, honestly. There's so many other platforms out there that can still get you the goals that you want for the money that you have. And just as a more fun factor, you're being different than most other people in the community. I get it. Z's, for example, are cool. We're going to talk about it in another video. And I might upset some of you guys in the video, though I don't intend to. I might upset some of you guys listening to this video, though I don't intend to. I'm just sharing ideas. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because it could even help you out. Try something different. Something that you can afford, perhaps. So, yeah. I think the QR25 and the KA24, and they're sedans, by the way, guys. Some of them are sedans, actually. And there are some others with the QR24s that are coupes. But, I mean, when's the last time you've seen a Maxima run? And when's the last time you've seen one be competitive? Probably never, right? But it doesn't have to be like that, because the potential is there. There's probably very few people that have them and did something with them and did not even turbocharge them. And they just do well. And if you haven't seen it, try it if you want to. Whether it's drag racing or road courses. I think they would do very well on road courses, especially if it's the coupes or, the 90s model Altimas, because they're lighter, probably a little bit more agile. You have a manual gearbox as well. It'd be fun, I think. You wouldn't have to break the bank to do it. These cars are very common, like Hondas are common. They're not as expensive because they're not as popular. And technically, they're mid-sized sedans for their times. And some of them are coupes. A not so sporty coupe at that. So I think it's a great sleeper, because who talks about an Altima unless it's, a show car? Nobody talks about them for performance application. Though, about 5 years ago, there was an Altima Coupe, a 08, I believe, if not a 2010, that was in the IMSA street class. If you guys don't know what that is, IMSA Racing Series is a motorsport sanction that goes throughout the country here. And yeah, it's really cool. And of course, certain classes are limited to certain things, mods, whatever, but it was in there. Did it win? No. Was it competitive? Yes. Why? Because it was out on the track every race of the season, and it didn't break. So there you go. That's it for this video. I will go into the V6 Altima, and at that point probably should go ahead and throw the Maxima in there too, at that point as well. And I know I'm going to compare it to, the 350 and 370s and G37s and things like that, because they have the same or very similar V6s. But it's just, I think it's cool. Again, for what these cars are, even the 4-cylinder applications, they're not heavy for what they are and for their time and their layouts even. You might argue that they're heavy in comparison to, let's say some Hondas. And I mean, of course, you'd be right if you're talking about hatchbacks. I mean, what's lighter than a hatchback, honestly? But if we're talking like, 4-door Civics, EGs, okay, it might be a little lighter. Preludes, definitely not. Probably about the same weight. But who runs Preludes? We're going to talk about that in another video. But I mean, honestly, who cares though? Because then there's gearing and so many other things. So it's not that simple as, power to weight, though that's very important. A lot of people don't even factor that in. But I just think it's very underrated. And that's what makes this car a perfect sleeper. Let me know what you guys think. Like, subscribe, and share. If you would do this, if you've done it, if you know somebody who has, please share it with me. Send me messages on Instagram. Honestly, I just think it's cool. Next videos coming up with Nissans is going to be, again, the VQ and the Altima and Maxima, and then we're going to transition to the Nissan Sentra as well. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Talk to you soon.